Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Day 3 of the Democrats' National Convention in the books.
Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris for inviting me to be part of this incredible campaign.
Running mate Tim Walz takes the stage with Oprah and former President Bill Clinton. What are the policy specifics from Kamala Harris's presidential platform? Her former economic advisor Mike Pyle joins us, taking on higher prices.
What it isn't is price controls, pure and simple. This is not intervening in the basic price-setting mechanisms of our market economy.
And we'll look into plans to tax investment income.
Devil is in the details, once again.
The details that we know about.
Yes.
Then Microsoft's AI, ready to screenshot everything you do? Yikes. Disney on a succession search, and we're making sense of the markets with some wisdom from Charlie Munger.
Think it over, and you'll agree with me, because you're smart, and I'm right.
Plus,
Do you use your Peloton?
My Peloton got sold, my friend.
pandemic darling Peloton, under $4 a share. It is Thursday, August 22nd. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1. Cue Andrew.
Good morning. Welcome back to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernan. Becky's off, so it's just the two of us
It's 75
this
days.
morning.
Yep.
75 days
And we're
until
going to show you how it's done.
the election day.
Show you how it's done, respectfully.
We're going to talk politics.
We may a little.
A little.
More Fed, maybe.
Maybe some
more
Fed.
markets. But, you know, we're both reasonable people. at times.
Sorry, what time is it? Sorry,
at times. And we're both in the world of covering business. So
Yes.
we both, I think, would want to hold business accountable, but I think I admire the greatest economy in the world and the companies that make up that great economy. And I think you do too.
I do.
The way we watch it. So there are differing views of how things go on.
Different ways to think about that.
There are.
Yes, there are.
But mine is right. But you're gonna.
Let's talk about where the market's going right now.
We had that scare, the growth
Right.
scare a month ago, came all the way back, but now these last couple of sessions, up a little, 20, 30, 40 points. I don't know. I don't know if we're stalling. We got Jackson Hole. We got the Fed. We got that weird revision yesterday, which I thought would be actually friendly because it means a lot of the angst about the job market being too strong or overheated. Maybe you can lay some of those to rest and get your quarter point, get your half point. Who knows what we get?
Right.
But I didn't think that was necessarily a big negative. There are certain sectors of social media that think it was the numbers have been cooked all along. They've been trying to say everything. 170, 180 with with inflation coming. That's okay. That's pretty good, right? Have you been thinking about these things?
I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
And what I was just thinking about was you said to me, you looked at me and you said, because I'm usually right.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking.
Usually it doesn't even
But
do it.
I was thinking of a great quote that Warren Buffett used to say to Charlie Munger when they would disagree about things.
They did a lot, I think.
And
They were both right.
Munger would say, Warren, think it over and you'll agree with me because you're smart and I'm right.
That's an interesting way of doing it. So if I'm hoping for that with you.
Oh, I was.
Oh, you were actually. Oh,
Yeah.
see, I thought you were explaining that in my.
You're smart and I'm right. And if you think it over.
Okay, wait a second.
I'm complimenting you as saying that you're smart.
Okay. I'm not.
And I'm right.
I'm not falling for this. The minutes. We are going to the country. Right. It's a very close election. We know that.
That is true.
And people we just have to remember that just because you might have a different viewpoint doesn't mean you're just a horrible person. And it's such a close election that the people on one side have their reasons for supporting their candidate. The people on the other side have their reasons
People
for
see
supporting
it's
their
like a
candidate.
Rorschach test or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's possible to have this core, viewpoint of how the world works. And, well, you know how I'm not telling you anything you don't know about how I think. The minutes from the most recent Fed meeting showed officials overwhelmingly want to cut interest rates at the September meeting. And as I think, had intimated or suspected, there were quite a few that wanted to cut in July. It didn't happen. But most said that more information was needed before it would be appropriate to lower rates. It kind of dodged a bullet because for a while it looked like they should have cut with that growth scare. The VIX ran up to 50 or whatever. Bond yields plummeted. But now that growth scare seems like it's in the rearview mirror and really was probably unwarranted. A lot of the investment banks that raised the recession probability, they took it right back down. Meantime, a new cause for concern came yesterday after, we're talking about this. Data revisions at the Labor Department showed that employers might have hired or might have added 818,000 fewer jobs in the 12 months through March than previously believed. There was significant drama over the release of that data yesterday. It was due at 10 a.m. It was weird because we talked about it all morning. Becky was here talking about it all morning, waiting for it. People were bated breath, and it was a half hour late. It's like, you've had all these months to cook the books where you want to get them, and you still don't have them ready at 10 a.m. Do we know why? I don't. The Bureau of Labor.
No explanation.
Failed to post those figures. At least 3 banks called the department and got the numbers directly while the rest of the street waited. Mizuho, BNP Paribas, and Nomura all received the number over the phone before the data was released around 10:30 a.m. It's the latest flub from the Bureau. You might recall inadvertently published CPI data 30 minutes early back in May. The Bureau said it's looking into yesterday's error. Did nothing, as far as I could see, to either help or hurt stocks, or it didn't even do much for the bond market. I don't think yesterday.
Did not at all. A fascinating story in the House of the Mouse, the Magic House. Disney tapping former Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman to lead a committee searching for a successor to Bob Iger. Gorman joined Disney's board earlier this year. He said he plans to step down as executive chair of Morgan Stanley in December. Iger returned, of course, as Disney's CEO in November of 2022 for an initial period of 2 years. Then the company extended his contract. The stock has been somewhat volatile since Iger's return, down about 1% as the company navigated an activist battle, strikes in Hollywood, of course, and that box office slump. In addition to Gorman, Disney's chairman, Mark Parker, also serves on the succession committee, along with GM CEO Mary Barra and Lululemon CEO Calvin McDonald. It's just interesting to see all of this happening out in the open. I guess that's a good thing. It's very unusual. You don't normally talk succession this openly. You rarely talk about who's on the succession committee. Having said all of that, James Gorman had one of the great successions himself at Morgan Stanley. I mean, his succession, and we will see, of course, whether his successor at Morgan Stanley, meaning who he's handed it off to, whether that's as successful too, but by all accounts so far, it seems to be a success.
Interesting boardroom drama. I was more fixated on the absolute level of Disney stock versus what's happened to Netflix in the past couple of days. and we could look at a 3-year chart.
Yep.
But I don't know if you remember, but at 180, when Netflix fell from 700 to 180, I said, I'm telling you, I would mortgage, if we can't, we're not allowed to buy stocks, but I would mortgage everything I owned to buy Netflix at $180. Now,
even though for years you used to be completely naysayer of Netflix.
I don't think
in the early days.
I don't know whether I'd said that. I mean, I'm slow to make the move.
But then when you make it, you make it. Okay.
Well, I'm still not, I have trouble navigating good things to find on Netflix, but I understand that that's the future.
Right.
And linear TV is never, you're not going to sit around waiting for 8 o'clock to watch Seinfeld. That's probably not going to happen anymore. Do we have a 3-year? So there's the 3-year.
There's the 3-year.
You got one, it's a tale of two cities. One's up 40% and one is down 40%. Disney for a while we thought deserved to be $300 a share because of Disney Plus. So they're in streaming. They've got the diversification with the theme parks, but sometimes you're hoping for something sometimes everything goes bad at the same time. So linear TV there, Disney Plus. I guess they finally made a profit, right? But the theme parks
I think Disney Plus will ultimately turn. Will it ever turn and become a global business the way Netflix is right now? Well, this goes back to the idea that I think it's possible there's only 1 or 2 players that completely win at this game of streaming. Then the question is, how do you think of the linear channels? And then the question, and are you putting a terminal rate of 0 on those channels? I think that's crazy. And then are you going to, how much value are you going to put on the theme parks? I would put a lot of value on the theme parks. Now, right now, we know the consumer's challenged, China. But
China.
I wouldn't.
You gotta say it right.
I wouldn't just,
China.
like I wouldn't write it off.
But you go all the way back to what was the original, what was Mickey called? Look how old Disney is. That's now $160 billion. Netflix used to send you DVDs in the mail. Came out of nowhere, $300 billion. So it's weird. It's weird the way things can flip. Disney was in the catbird seat in head, but it's amazing.
But by the way, we could show if you did a chart. I mean, it depends how you want to look at it. We could do a chart of Walt Disney and show Warner Brothers Discovery, and you'd have
Not much different. I
would think.
I mean, it's good that they have the other assets.
I'm saying you would look at that and you would say that's an issue, right? You could do this against Paramount. That's a real issue.
Yep.
You could throw our parent company into this. I'm just saying.
Well, we got some stuff.
It's not. No, but all I'm saying is to look at Disney and say that somehow Disney has been, hardly managed.
I wasn't saying that. I'm not saying it's been bad managed. I'm not saying it's all the, that you go woke, you go broke. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying.
You just did.
No, I didn't. I just said that you can come out of nowhere with the new technology and completely displace what should have been. I mean, I would have put my money on Disney 10 years ago versus some DVD company.
But I would say there's two things. It was new technology and capital. It was the market that allowed Netflix to run at a loss for a long time as well, sort of Amazon-like, right? Remember? And say, okay, you can go spend money wildly, which it seemed like they were doing until they were able to get enough of a programming slate, and that's what they did.
And think about Warner. You had HBO was already entrenched. You had a lot of legacy players that were there. Okay, so it's not just Snow White and the Seven Magical Creatures that caused this to happen. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Microsoft saying yesterday that it's going to be releasing its controversial Recall AI feature for Windows beta testers beginning in October. That feature uses an AI model to take screenshots of nearly everything you do or see on your computer screen, and it gives you the ability to search for information you saw earlier. It also generates a timeline of your work on every particular day. Security researchers warning, though, about the risks of Windows automatically capturing images, which could be used by hackers to obtain personal information from users. Microsoft responding to that warning back in June, saying that it was delaying the launch and that Recall would be turned off by default and users would have to opt in. But how many times, Joe, have you seen something on a website or some app or something else, and a day later or 5 days later, say, what was that? What was that site I was on? I saw that ad or I saw that thing. I got to find it. And you can't find it. Or even, by the way, I do a lot of writing, Sometimes I'll forget something. I know I wrote something down. I wrote it. Did I write it in Word? Did I write it in the app, the Notes app? What was I doing?
Yeah.
For those of us who, unfortunately, can't always remember everything at the tip of our tongue.
I think it happens. I mean, it's been happening to me when I read all these newspapers. I see things all over, and I remember something sticks in my mind that I want to bring up to make a point with you.
Think if you were trying to make a debate point with me, and in the moment you could just type in.
With me, it's old, but I'm looking at physical
GOP polls.
I'm looking at physical papers. That's never going to work for me because I still use the physical papers instead of online.
It'll eventually will happen.
I was thinking
because what's going to happen is
you're going
to
to say, how many times have you been looking at something and then 5 minutes later an ad for something comes up, or even sometimes it seems like I'm talking about something and it's weird. As I say, Positano is great, and then I look, travel agent trips to Positano come up.
That's a different issue.
Is that a coincidence?
We've discussed this before.
Well, tell me, because I'm worried that they're always listening, and sometimes
they are always listening. They're just not listening, I believe, by audio. What I think is happening, if you really want to know, what's happening is because you're attached to Facebook, even though I know you think you're not attached to Facebook.
No, I'm not.
But through WhatsApp, maybe.
Nope.
Or maybe you are on Instagram.
Nope.
But I don't even know what you're doing, but you're doing something.
I'm not on it.
And oftentimes it's because, two people are near each other. They both know the phones are near each other. And so if you might say something, then I'll search for it, by the way. And then then it will show up on your thing.
I don't understand any.
It's a lot of that kind of connection. But where I was going to go with this on the Microsoft thing, even though you use your papers, in the future,
papers,
we're all going to wear glasses. Those Meta glasses we've talked about, or maybe some Snap glasses or somebody else's glasses.
You sure?
Yep. And that will remember everything that you've seen.
I don't want to wear glasses.
It's going to happen. You're wearing contacts now, aren't you?
I am.
Okay.
But I'm not wearing glasses. Oh, I can wear contacts?
Maybe
That's like, now we're getting like the Matrix.
Could be like digital contacts.
You weren't here for the orb story.
Nope.
The iris.
I was not.
Reading all the world coin.
Yep.
I mean, it's a front page.
Sam Altman, I know.
To make sure that we're not, the person that you're talking to isn't a robot.
Right.
Physically, not a bot on Twitter. Well,
and then, of course, if they have all of the copies of everybody's iris, then who knows?
Every person on the planet.
Right.
Think about that.
Tease will be next.
Coming up, as she reintroduces herself to the American voter, Vice President Harris's former economic advisor joins us here on Squawk. Wall Street and White House veteran Mike Pyle.
Do people ever call you Private Pyle? I've done that before, haven't I?
You've actually done that.
Parsing the policy that we have so far from the Harris campaign. And what are we interested in? Taxes, taxes, taxes.
The cost of housing, the cost of prescription drugs, the cost of groceries. This is a front of mind topic, and she wants the American people to know, again, there's going to be a cop on the beat.
Squawk Pod is back right after this. This is Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernan. Becky is off today. We got a lot going on.
It's the honor of my life to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz accepting the Democratic nomination for Vice President last night at the DNC in Chicago. Megan Cassella is there, and she joins us with the highlights. Good morning.
Good morning, Angie from Chicago. We've made it to Thursday here, where folks behind me are getting ready for night 4, the final night of the Democratic convention. But night 3 last night is still wrapping up. And once again, it was focused on those same themes of sort of protecting freedoms, of taking on Trump, and once again on the politics of joy. There were a number of celebrities here. Oprah Winfrey made a surprise appearance and speech here last night. John Legend performed, Stevie Wonder performed, Mindy Kaling was here, and some Democratic heavyweights spoke. That was once again former President Bill Clinton.
After the last 2 days, aren't you proud to be a Democrat?
But as you mentioned, the headliner for the night was Governor Tim Walz. This was really his chance to formally accept his nomination and to introduce himself to this party that after just joining the campaign and the ticket just about 2 weeks ago. This was a very short speech by historical standards, just about 15 minutes. So the shortest VP acceptance speech going back to about at least 1984. And he used this again. This was a very biographical speech. He spoke about his small town roots. He came out to John Mellencamp's song Small Town and spoke about growing up in Nebraska, on working with his neighbors and being in Congress, and also about his background as a coach and a teacher. And he spoke about his family, and there was this very emotional moment.
Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you.
His kids both had tears streaming down their face, and his son Gus stood up and said, "That's my dad." It's a very emotional moment, both for the family and for the party, as they accepted their new VP nominee. But Walz also reprised his role as Harris's attack dog, and he went after Trump pretty hard. Take a listen.
Here's the thing. It's an agenda nobody asked for. It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need.
Walz went on to say that he had not given many big speeches throughout his career, but that he had given a lot of pep talks. And then he said this.
It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready.
Now, Walz did not give us much by way of policy, much substantive details there. He spoke a little bit about wanting to cut middle-class taxes and take on big pharma. But there weren't a lot of details there, and that did spark criticism from the Trump campaign, which was out pretty quickly to say that Walz had spent no time on anything of substance. And guys, just one last point is that does sort of indicate where things are headed in this campaign. Democrats have had all the momentum for the last month since President Biden withdrew. This has been a week-long party here. There's one more night here when Harris accepts her nomination and gives a big speech. But from there, they do have to start answering those policy questions. They've said Harris will sit for an interview with the media, so it's the hard part that's still to come. Guys?
Okay. Megan, we appreciate it. What a night.
A key topic in Vice President Harris's economic agenda has drawn criticism from economists on both sides of the aisle. Her proposal to crack down on alleged price gouging at grocery stores. Joining us now is Mike Pyle, who served as chief economic advisor to Vice President Harris. He's now informally advising her campaign. Have you been on board with the way some of these economic initiatives have been rolled out, Mike, or would you have done it differently?
So let's be clear on what this proposal is and was it what it isn't. I mean, what it isn't is price controls, pure and simple. This is not intervening in the basic price setting mechanisms of our market economy. What it is being sure that there's a cop on the beat in emergency situations, making sure that there aren't bad actors out there taking advantage of the American consumer. This is the type of authority that we see in 40 different states, red states and blue states alike, and it's really focused on making sure in those emergencies there's a cop on the beat.
See, just because you sort of have to explain what it isn't after the rollout, I think it is illustrative of that it's not maybe wasn't the greatest first initiative to make. And I think typically grocery chains have about a 1 or 2% margin. And when there is price gouging in a normal system, there are antitrust laws, there's anti-monopoly laws. It can't be done because competition doesn't allow you to stay higher than where all your peers are. And what it looks like, Mike, is that the administration was well aware that it was underwater on Bidenomics and on the economy because of inflation. So it looks like a way to just try to deflect blame from, maybe it was just a pandemic. Even if it wasn't Bidenomics, it happened globally. The administration always points out inflation happened globally. Yeah, so why blame it on U.S. companies that were gouging? Say it's not our fault. It's these, that's part of a common theme, anti-corporate theme from the Biden administration. Why?
So I think if you look at the vice president's speech on Friday, you see a lot in there that's about the ways in which we need to create a very stable, secure environment for business to operate in this country. Talks about cutting through unnecessary red tape, talks about creating certainty for businesses, big and small, to do what they do best, which is innovate and create jobs. At the same time, prices are front of mind for the American people, and whether that's the cost of housing, the cost of prescription drugs, the cost of groceries, this is a front of mind topic, and she wants the American people to know, again, there's going to be a cop on the beat making sure they're not taking advantage of.
The other thing that at least to me is sort of incongruous is that one of the things that the Biden-Harris administration talks about is how much better the United States did emerging from the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, we created 50 million jobs, we did this, we did that. None of that was we, the government. Most of that was the economy that we have in the United States made up of all these great companies. So on the one hand, you're saying we did better than anywhere else because we got these great companies. God, they're hiring all these people, they're doing all these great things. So we're going to raise taxes on these companies from 21 to 28%. Why?
So, I think that if you look at where we are, we need to be in a place where we're asking the wealthiest and the biggest businesses to pay their fair share. And we've got to do that for a couple of reasons.
Wealthy businesses?
We've got to do that for a couple of reasons.
Weird term to use.
We've got to do that for a couple of reasons. One, we need to make a set of investments in the middle class. The vice president talked about the need to build more housing and to invest in building more housing in this country. Talked about the way in which we need to make sure that families with the smallest children have the support they need, like the child tax credit. We also need to reduce the deficit. These are things that we need to do, and it's going to require more taxes to do that.
Do you think that the performance of business, which is lauded by the administration because of how well the economy is doing. I mean, you don't think that's going to be affected by... And then the other thing I was thinking, we subsidize in the IRA all these favored businesses. We subsidize in the CHIP Act all these favored businesses. So on the one hand, we're giving them money. On the other hand, we're raising taxes. It just seems like a strange way to do things.
So, I think that America's had a long history of a very innovative, dynamic corporate and business sector. We've led the world in innovation, technology, just basic corporate capacity. We've also for a long time had a corporate tax rate of 35%.
Oh, I know.
And we had an incredibly dynamic...
Good things have happened at 21.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies say they wouldn't have done it.
And good things can happen at 28 too.
My question actually is slightly different. Look, the second that any of these candidates puts up a policy, they get critiqued, right? And that we talked for a very long time about.
You want to talk tariffs? I mean,
the vaguer you are, the better it is politically, because nobody can then start, trying to find holes in the plan. What I was actually asking on the corporate tax front is, yes, Democrats have been calling for 28% for a long time. Was there any thought about saying, you know what, actually, in terms of showing our hand about how we actually feel about business, one way or the other? Because one of the things that's happening privately is a lot of people around Harris are saying, actually, we're very good for business. Going at a 25% rate. And the reason I mentioned 25, that was actually the rate that most CEOs thought they were going to get actually under Trump.
Why raise it at all?
And then Trump put it down to 21. So if you were going to sort of try to say to the business community, look, we're for you. We favor what you want. Because once you get over 25, and the reason why that 25 was sort of a hurdle was then you get into this conversation about where do you actually want to be if you're a company. Meaning, we talked about remember corporate inversions and the like.
I don't know if that's the cutoff. It's 7% of total revenues, corporate taxation, and you're going to raise it. It's not even doing anything. Why not talk entitlements? Why not talk Social Security, Medicare?
But you know what is in there?
Really
carried interest.
That's weird because you had
as it should be.
We had a chance to do that before.
Yes.
And a Democrat put the cop. I don't know. Was she a Democrat at the end? I don't know. Sinema. Remember?
Yes. Maybe let's talk one more tax policy, which is if we look at the former president's platform. There's a proposal in there to raise taxes across the board on basically everything that we import from overseas, functionally a national sales tax.
You mean tariffs?
Yeah, a national sales tax on everyday goods, fuel, food, diapers. And these are things that American consumers, households are going to have to pay more for.
Right. I think there's an article today about how both sides have these populist policies that are basically regressive and not taking us where we want to go. Strange political environment. You miss it much?
I'm very happy to be right here.
You mean on Squawk Box?
I'm thrilled to be on Squawk Box and thrilled to be in New York City.
Do people ever call you Private Pyle? I've done that before, haven't I?
You've actually done that before.
I
think the last
So people
time,
do.
Yeah, people do. The last time, in fact, I heard
Private Pyle.
Some people.
Private Pyle.
Right.
It's such an advantage to be a boomer. I'm telling you. It's just. You see, Generation X, they got no money to retire on. That's you. You got money. Well, you do have money.
We're trying.
Next on Squawk Pod, is Peloton spinning its wheels? Another quarter in the books, another pandemic purchase sold secondhand.
And that's where I really did get a good workout, was trying to get that up the steps.
And more on Vice President Harris's tax ideas. Robert Frank explains the plan for capital gains.
If you have over $1 million in income in 1 year, you're subject for that tax.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Joe Kernan.
Vice President Harris is proposing a tax increase that would dramatically impact investors. Robert Frank joins us now with more. Devil is in the details, once again. Who it would apply to, how it would be applied.
The details that we know about.
Yes.
And we only know some right now, and those are that Vice President Harris proposing to double the tax on capital gains and taxing the unrealized gains for the very wealthy. Her campaign endorsing a plan that calls for increasing the top tax rate on long-term cap gains from 20% to 44.6%. That would be the highest rate in U.S. history. So if you're in New York, you sold stock, the combined city and state federal rate would be 55.5%. In California, it would be 57.9%. She's also calling for a tax on unrealized gains for those with a net worth of more than $100 million. That would call for a minimum tax of 25% on those unrealized gains. So they'd be taxed on any annual increase in the value of an asset or stock, even if you never sold it. So non-tradable assets like a private company, they would be taxed at the last valuation event plus some set annual increase. Illiquid taxpayers, those are defined with less than 20% of their wealth in tradable assets, they could defer payments on those illiquid gains until their death, but with some kind of interest charge. All very complicated. Some estimates show the tax would raise about $500 billion in revenue over 10 years. So aside from raising revenue, what this gets at is the point that Andrew has been making for a long time, which is that you have a lot of wealth that is accrued in value, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, where the stock gains $50, $100 billion over a lifetime. It's then passed on to heirs or through a trust or given to charity. Step up in basis means all that wealth has never been taxed, and they've been getting income against it.
Sorkin has a much better way of getting at it and approaching it. You know, the $500 billion we could use to pay for what it would take to monitor whether this is being done right and whether.
No, there's two things.
You might break even.
One is that you have to.
It's impossible.
One is you have to do step up basis on death. You have to.
Right, and her plan calls for that as well.
Why don't you do the loan?
The major piece of it, I think, from just a straight fairness perspective, rather than taxing the unrealized gains unto themselves, is to say for those folks who've decided effectively to live off of loans and get money against their stock, which is the equivalent, if you will, of realizing the gain without realizing the gain, that at some number you decide that you are effectively taxing that loan as if you were selling the stock.
Right.
That to me is the easiest and fairest way of doing
How do you differentiate that loan from a mortgage, let's say? I mean, what do you say? Okay, that's a business. I'm going to call that a business loan, and then so then you're going to tax a business loan. You then have to differentiate loans that you're going to tax because they're income versus all the other loans that you would use.
No, I'm doing it over a certain amount of money. So let's say you have a basis in a certain stock.
Right.
And you were not selling the stock, and you were taking a loan against that stock. And let's just say over.
What if it's a loan against an illiquid? I mean, most of the wealth in this country is in private companies.
Right.
So with those, let's say you're taking out a loan against your company using that as income. What's to say that's you label it as a business loan, and then you got to tax a business loan?
How are you labeling it as a business loan if it's against your own personal stock?
If you own the company and you say, look, I'm going to take this as the company and I control the proceeds of that loan, I'm going to use it as income.
Correct. I believe then you would go and look at that and say that's a personal loan to yourself, depending on how the money is used.
Right.
Yes. If the company if you're taking a loan against your company's assets and using that money to invest in the company, we can have a different conversation. Right. If you're using the loan to go buy a home or buy a boat or live, which is what a lot of people are doing these days, you would decide that you were taxing that. I mean, Bill Ackman, I think, actually wrote about this last night on Twitter, which was actually similar to what I've been talking about for quite some time. And I think it's, not to say it was.
There's a lot of, I think I heard Biden the other day say there's 1,000 billion. I don't know what he said. He was complaining about billionaires, which seems like a good thing. But I think the elephant in the room is that capital gains thing he just said. I mean, that
the above $1 million, the going to 55.5%. Here's the thing about that. People say, well, it's only rich people. If you sell a large amount of stock in 1 year, and all of your income, your ordinary income combined with that gain is over $1 million, you're subject to this tax above a certain amount. It's not like if you have over $1 million in income in 1 year, you're subject for that tax.
Let me read actually what Bill wrote last night, because I think he actually did a very articulate job of this. He says, the way to fix the problem is to make borrowing an amount in excess of your basis in a stock taxable. In other words, if you have $10 billion of stock in a company that you founded with zero basis, loans secured by the stock should be taxable as if you sold a like amount of stock. Okay? So, for example, if you borrowed $1 billion, you would have a capital gain of $1 billion. This would be fair and practical to implement. Now, you wouldn't do a double taxation later.
Right.
So,
That's right.
That you're taking that off the table. But the point is that for folks who decide they're effectively living off of these loans.
So you get a credit against the ultimate gain when you sell all the stock.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fairer way to do it than trying to tax the unrealized gains.
Because you're right,
completely.
you're essentially taxing a realization.
It's a realization
it's a
event.
different form of realization. Yeah.
Exactly.
I like
None of
that.
these,
Okay.
None of these things are going to happen, but we need to have the discussion. Probably. Maybe they could if the House and Senate both won, right?
I mean, they need revenue.
Right.
We haven't heard a lot of revenue on either side.
Peloton just out with quarterly results. The fitness company reporting a loss of 8 cents a share. It's a narrower loss than expected. Revenue of $644 million, slightly ahead of analysts' estimates. Connected fitness subscribers are coming in at 2.98 million, roughly in line with expectations. For the full year, Peloton sees revenue coming in the range of $2.4 billion to $2.5 billion. That's below, though, estimates. The stock on the back of this news up 8%, but meantime, $3.64 a share. I don't know, Joe. Do you use your Peloton?
My Peloton got sold, my friend.
You sold it.
Got a good price for it. The only problem was, and that's where I really did get a good workout, was trying to get that up the steps.
Get it up
from the
basement.
Steps. That was one of the best workouts. Do you know how heavy those bikes are?
I thought the workout was when you would hang your clothes
and
on
bringing the clothes up the steps from having hung them on. Didn't work for me.
Did you end up buying a hanger? Was the hanger cheaper?
A hanger was a wardrobe rack. Wardrobe rack.
You got a wardrobe rack in its place.
Rack. There's one in upstairs. There is one there. It's not my stuff. I'm simple, as you know, in a lot of ways.
That is Squawk Pod for today. Thank you for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Get the best of our TV show right in your ears when you follow Squawk Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great Thursday, and we'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.